Your feelings are your feelings. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to like what they're feeling in that moment. Like it's okay for me to have my feelings hurt. And even if he doesn't get why my feelings hurt, I just need for him to understand I'm not in a good space right now. And I need him not to diminish my feelings, right? And so that's the important part. And I think sometimes we feel like, I can't believe you got mad. Then they get mad that you mad. It's like, but if that's the feeling, that's the feeling. And so it's like, are you mad that I'm mad? Like,
hello and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationship
from surviving to thriving.
If this is your first time joining us on TMC, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video. Today on TMC, we have Mr. Kelvin and Miss Teleshia Delmar with The Lover's Bond.
I am Kelvin Delmar, my wife Teleshia. We've been married 2 years, I know, right? We're the parents of 3 kids. One adult, we have one adult kid, right? And we have a 14 and 15-year-old.
Okay, teenagers.
Yes, that keeps us busy. Along with a dog, you know, so we're that typical family, you know, that's all over the place and trying to make things happen and keeping everybody in line.
That's amazing. So 21 years. So let's talk about this. So how did you guys meet and what was that connection like?
I was single and naturally, and a single father, right? Raising a girl. And I have a very close friend named Regina. And I wasn't dating a lot, but I was dating off and on because I was a single father. And Regina basically told me that she did not like all the women that I would date. So what Regina did was she actually put an ad, right, in a paper, a singles ad for me. Oh, wow. So she put it in the paper.
Now you got to remember, this is over 20 years ago.
20
so we
years
have
ago,
all the apps that's out there today.
Right. This was like a local newspaper. And it was funny because she put it in and I actually forgot about it. And, you know, and I got a few calls here and there, but I kind of blew it off. And one night, I guess, I actually read the profile that Regina wrote, you know, and she decided to call. So
this is so funny. So he had Regina. I had my mom, and my mom was like, girl, you need to put yourself out there. So my mom was the one who encouraged me to call into, you know, this ad. So I did this ad and I actually forgot about it. And so like a month, 2 months later, my mom was like, hey, did you ever do that? And I was like, all right. So the way that it was designed was I left everything that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And then apparently he leaves, you know, the guys would leave messages in this phone number that I left. It's not my real phone, but it was a phone number that I left. So I had to call in and listen to the messages. So when I finally remembered, it was like, I don't know, 20 some odd messages. So I was just listening through. I was like, yeah, I don't like him. Nope. So then when I got to Kelvin, I was like, I may need to call him back, right? So y'all, so I called him. And the first time I called him, he said, can I call you back? I'm feeding my daughter. Oh. And I was like, okay. And I hung up and I was like, feeding your daughter. My mind instantly went to like bottle. And I was like, oh, that's fresh, whatever that is. And I don't know if I want to get myself in that. So I literally debated about calling him back. And so I went through the phones and I started calling other people. And then some people, after the first conversation, I was like, I'm done. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to call this Kelvin back. I'm going to call him back. And when I called him back and I was like, so what's up? Like, what? You said you were feeding your daughter. How old is your daughter? And at that time, I think she was probably like 7 or 6 or something.
Maybe 7. Yeah.
So, and I was like, oh, okay. Because then now I'm like, all right, this is not fresh, right? He wasn't something fresh. And so we just started dating. And so it's so funny. For a long time, we didn't tell people that story because, you know, back then it was all taboo about how you meet people and stuff. Right. Then finally, when I opened up my company, Lovers Bond, and I was like, babe, are we really going to put up there on the website how we met? And he was like, all right, let's do it. So then we put it on the website. So then it became public.
Yeah.
By that time, we just told everybody we met each other through a friend. We just met through a friend. When we came out, our story came out, and I can honestly say 21 years later, we're happier than ever.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Awesome.
Yeah.
So 21 years later, here you are as a couple.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about your journey.
Oh, yeah. My thing is, I believe one of the hardest things about marriage is that you're bringing two people in that have been raised differently, different households, morals, values, education, financial levels. It's so many things that are different, and you're trying to combine that into one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the friction comes in, because the littlest things, can be little to me, big to her, and vice versa.
Right.
So, and that's when the patience come in. That's when the commitment comes in. That's when the whole, all right, listen, I'm gonna stick this out. But there's plenty of days when she was like, I don't know. And there were plenty of days when I was like, I don't know.
Really?
Yeah,
we had
so and I don't know. We haven't talked to not one couple that's married that hasn't had that same feeling somewhere along the line.
I had my stepdaughter, so we're trying to have this blended family. So we didn't get a chance to try to really gel us because we had to gel with with her.
Yes.
And so that was a whole new dynamic because she was a daddy's girl. So who was I? Here come this lady up in the piece. So we had a lot of arguments around how to handle that. And that was a big part of the beginning part of our relationship. And then, my mom, God rest her soul, but my mom was a meddling mother-in-law. So, my mom, I'm an only child. So, it was hard for her to let her baby go.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wanted to really insert herself.
On top of that, I have a younger sister, and my parents are deceased. So I actually, put her through college. So she was going to George Mason.
Wow.
So she had just graduated. So after she graduated from George Mason, she also moved in with us. So yeah.
And I had to remind her there's one queen up in this house, right? Because she thought, this is my brother's house. And I was like, but I'm the wife. So we have friction there. So we had a lot of our friction in the beginning of trying to manage those other relationships. It was just like, I'm not feeling this. This is not what I had envisioned. And then you go through is this what I signed up for? Like, this ain't even fun no more. So we had our trying times for sure. So when he proposed, my husband actually, I was attending there, but you were playing basketball at the First Baptist, but you were going to From the Home. Right. And so it's a church in Maryland, sorry y'all. So we were like, all right, we want to do this right. So we went through their premarital class. Now, little did we know their premarital class was not the typical 3 sessions in with the pastor and that's premarital. Our premarital class was 9 months long.
Wow.
And so we really, when they announced that, I was like, like, really? And at the time they were like, they told the women to give the ring back because they didn't want you to focus on planning the wedding.
Wow, that's good.
Deciding, number one, are you even fit for marriage? That's the first thing. Are you ready for marriage? And then the second thing is the person you sit beside, is that the one that you're supposed to be with? So they really had a really strict premarital class. And I think we would have suffered a lot more had we not had that foundation.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, Teleshia, I thought I had what question I wanted to ask next, but then you just opened up a whole nother parallel because I'm like, man, sometimes people can't get through 6 weeks worth of premarital classes, 9 months. That's awesome. Yeah. But I do want to do this real quick. I know I'm going backwards, but I want to go back because when you were talking about your daughter and your mom, and you were talking about how things happen, and you mentioned that the friction in the beginning started outside of you all. I thought that's important because a lot lot of times couples are not necessarily prepared for that, because you think that, the only thing that you're going to have issues with, or the only thing that sometimes you don't think you're going to have issues because you're in love, everything is awesome and great, but never thinking about the outside part. So I was glad that you mentioned that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, without taking us too far back, but talk a little bit about how you guys were able to navigate, you said the meddling mother-in-law, and then, the daughter accepting, a new queen in the home.
I'll start with my mom, right? So my mom, it was tough. And I will admit that I didn't do enough on my end of managing that. And a lot of times I would go to Kelvin and be like, just brush it off, like just ignore. And I didn't do enough to really intercede. Part of that was pulling back a little bit and saying, you know what, this is my marriage, mom. And I had those conversations, but I didn't have them as much as I should have had them. And I used to tell my husband, like, I don't want to talk about it because it's going to make her cry and it's going to get all emotional and it's just draining. And so for selfish reasons, I didn't want to address the issue. And so one of the things that, I don't know, babe, you tell me. I felt like, all right, I had a few conversations and it would get better just because we would pull ourselves kind of back and just kind of setting more boundaries with my mom. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, kind of helped ease it when I didn't want to have some of those uncomfortable conversations with her. I would just be like, all right. And so then it became I talked to my mom every day, but I would talk to her on my ride home from work. Mm-hmm. So then she got her fix of me without necessarily having to come to the house or kind of interfering. So I was able to give her fix, but then keeping it kind of separate. And that kind of managed us in our last, I think, years.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, understand this part as well. She lived in walking distance from our home. You just forgot about that part. She lived in walking distance from our home. And I think a lot of the friction actually came in was because she would brush it off and she wouldn't handle it. And I would want her to handle it. Like we need to talk, like this needs to be taken care of. And it was always like, no. And that was my frustrating part. I saw it just, being permission to continue to act the way you're acting, So that was my frustrating part, and like anything else, you build up and build up and build up. And then when that one thing tips over, everything pours out, So, and that was the thing that was, kind of back and forth, for a while. And then when my sister, kind of moved in, and that was the thing that I was upset with, because when my sister actually started to, step out of line, I took her outside and I said, listen, this is not how this works in my house. And I said, and this is how it's going to go. And this is how you're going to respect her. And this is your place in this home, And, but I wanted her to do the same thing. And so that was the kind of frustrating part, where we kind of really tussled with that back and forth for a while.
What advice would you give to someone that's dealing with a situation like that right now?
That they have to understand that husband and wife, that's your obligation right there. Yeah. Your obligation is to God, then your spouse, and then your kids. Yeah. That has to be in that order. Yeah. It's put in that order for a reason. It's not 50-50, it's not little here, little there. That is the order, and in order to make it through, you have to remind yourself and you have to keep that order, regardless of whatever the other spouse, mother-in-law, father-in-law, aunt, cousin, whatever they say. You have to understand that that is the order, and that's my first obligation first. Everything else comes after that. If this is my first obligation, but if you don't like my decision, then I'm sorry. And the word no is a complete sentence. It's okay to say no.
I like that.
So so that's how I think about that. Yeah.
I see a lot of people, a lot of couples still struggle with that issue. Like, I don't want to make my mom mad, perhaps the husband is a mama's boy, right? And so I'm trying to please my wife at the same time I want to please mom too.
Yeah. And I understand that's a difficult thing. I do get that. You have to be willing. Everyone that comes to the party can't leave with you, so you have to be able to have that thing where you're okay with leaving some people behind. Yeah. You're okay with separating yourself from certain family members because they don't understand or they don't respect the boundaries and the dynamics of your family. Yeah. You have to be okay with that. you know, and if you're not okay with it, that's when the struggle comes in. Because what people do is they will pull on your emotions. They will hit every emotional button they can. So, but you have to be willing to understand this is my lineup. This is how it goes. You know, and and I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry, Dad. But if you can't understand that and respect that, then, you know, we're going to have to kind of back off a little bit.
You can't be afraid to have that conversation more than once. Like it's not going to be resolved after one conversation. So there are going to be conversations. It may be helpful to have all parties in at the same time, so they both all hear it at the same time. And there are going to be opportunities where you need to have separate conversations to really reinforce that. And I think it comes from a place of, you know, everybody's situation is different, but sometimes people want to feel the love and they feel like, you know, when you get married, now you can't come over to Aunt Betty's house on Sundays now because you got your own family. Now, you know, and so now it's all of that comes into play. And so sometimes we have to look at, okay, what is their motive? Where is their heart? Like some people are just manipulative and just want to control the situation. And then there are other people who just genuinely love you and just miss you. And so when you really understand their heart, then you know how to really handle the situation a lot better. I feel like, you know, I got into this space of helping specifically wives because I felt like we don't talk enough about the hardships of marriage. Like at the end of the day, it's hard to really, you know, just as Kelvin talked about earlier, you're taking two individual people, different backgrounds, different outlooks on life, and you're trying to create a unit. That's not, it's not all going to be easy peasy. And so a lot of people haven't been given the tools to be able to navigate living day in and day out with the same person. Like that's a whole thing. Now, just for me personally, I was raised by a single mom. My mom could not tell me what it's like to be a wife. My mom couldn't tell me what it was like to be married. So unfortunately, I took what married life was supposed to be by watching The Cosby Show, because that was my upbringing. Every Thursday night, I saw Claire and Cliff on TV, and I modeled like, I want that. Right. And not realizing at the time that that's TV and that's not made up. And, you know, they don't really had no real problems, you know, in that show, right? Everything was all great and fine. And so, but I came into the marriage with those false expectations. And because I couldn't learn from others in my family what a healthy marriage was like, I really came in behind the 8 ball. And I feel like I would have struggled a lot more had we not had the 9-month premarital counseling. So it really kind of helped me see things better. And it doesn't, you know, premarital counseling never will prevent you from having any problems at all. But when you have those things that you can fall back on to understand these strategies, you recognize that you're not alone. Every marriage is going to have its ups and downs. And as long as you go back to the basics of how to communicate more effectively, you know, you'll get yourself in a better space and get unstuck a lot sooner.
Let me ask you this. Both of you guys can answer. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to someone that desires to be married?
When that other person is expressing themselves, it's not just out of the sky. It's coming from a place where that's how they feel, regardless of how crazy it might sound. It might, because I remember we had some conversation, and I used to be thinking like, what in the world is she? Like, where did that come from? I've learned over the years that it's coming from somewhere. You know, like she just didn't make it up. It's coming from somewhere. And regardless of how it sounds, that it's still her personal feelings. And you have to listen and respect that.
I think sometimes, and this is not my piece of advice, so I'm gonna get to mine, but I want to kind of echo and underscore something Kelvin said. Like, your feelings are your feelings. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to like what they're feeling in that moment. Like, it's okay for me to have my feelings hurt. And even if he doesn't get why my feelings hurt, I just need for him to understand I'm not in a good space right now. And I need him not to diminish my feelings, right? And so that's the important part. And I think sometimes we feel like, I can't believe you got mad. Then they get mad that you mad. It's like, but if that's the feeling, that's the feeling. It's also like, are you mad that I'm mad? Like, okay, so anyway, that's a good one. My piece of advice, that's a good one. It's so much, but I think one of the things that I had to learn, sometimes you're just not gonna like your spouse. And it does not mean that your marriage is doomed. It does not mean your marriage is over. I feel like we rush to call the marriage quits and over way too soon because we get into a space in a season where we're not feeling each other. That's going to happen. Like, I will always love you, but right now I ain't feeling you right now. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you got to sleep in a different bedroom and I got to sleep in a different bedroom. It doesn't mean I can't give you no nookie at night. It doesn't mean that we need to start looking at divorce. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to recognize that it's going to be a season where you might not be feeling each other, and it's okay. You know, with my wives, I use this analogy of if you know sports, right? At the end of the day, you have teams, you know, even when they're good, they make it to the playoff. And then some of them make it all the way up to the championship game, right? But then there's some seasons that just suck.
Yeah. Right?
And so those seasons that suck, what do? You may need to get a new coach. Maybe you need to get some new assistant players and move some pieces around. Now, I'm not saying get a new spouse. What I'm saying, you need to shift how you communicate. You need to shift how you all interact with one another, and not just call it quits just because you had a bad season. It's just like, no, we need to figure this thing out and make some changes so that we can ultimately get unstuck and get back to where we really want to be.
Wow, that's good. That's good.
Let's talk about Lover's Bond. What inspired you to begin this journey and why?
Because the struggle is real. That's why, Cedric. Let me tell you, when Kelvin and I, you know, we had problems and we went to counseling before marriage, after marriage, like we did all the things because we just made a commitment that we weren't going to give up. And one of the things that I realized is that, and honestly, what really happened is on my job, I was hiring people who were like their second or third job out of college. And, you know, they were just dating. And so I got to witness them get engaged and get married and have kids and all. And I used to say, you know what, come on in the lunchroom. Let me tell you about this married life. And they used to be like, oh, Teleshia, you're making a big deal about it. And then when they start going through struggles, they'd be like, man, you were right. And what that opportunity created for me is that we need to talk about married life more. People don't talk about married life. And I feel like if we put a name to it and say, sometimes there will be hard days, that people won't be so quick to give up. And I feel like it's like with mental health. It's like this stigma that nobody talks about. Like, this should not be a taboo topic. We should be talking openly about marriage. And so I created this really company to keep a platform of where we can talk about married life. So it's a safe space to be like, oh, for real? You went through that too? Phew, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. And you don't feel like it's over, like things are not working out. And so I just created it out of space of just trying to really not just save marriages from divorce, but I also want to help save marriages from dysfunction, right? Because there's so many people who are like, no, we ain't getting divorced, but then y'all ain't talking to each other, right? There is toxic, right? You're disrespectful to one another. And so I always say, we're not just saving you from divorce, because there's a lot of people who staying committed, but is that how God designed your marriage to be? I don't think so. So I say, you know, we're trying to save marriages from this divorce and from dysfunction.
Yes, that's good.
I like that. Definitely awesome. So if someone was to connect with Lover's Bond, just tell us a little bit of what she could expect to experience.
So I'm constantly doing challenges to kind of reinvigorate wives. Sometimes, you know, wives are very, very busy. They're overwhelmed, they're frustrated, they feel alone. And so I create this community so that people can come together and with like-minded wives in a safe space, and we talk about marital stuff. So every week I'm on Clubhouse. Every week I'm in my Wives Helping Wives Facebook group talking about the marital stuff. And I tell them, you want to join the group? Tell me what topics you want to hear. And then I just pick a topic and we talk about it. Because I wanted to create a space where wives could come and not feel embarrassed or ashamed. You know, as wives, especially, we carry that title as a wife really high. And we're excited to be the wife. But then when things are not going right, we shut down. We're a little bit too embarrassed to tell people it's not, you know, it's not on and popping like you see on social media. And so I wanted to create a space where people can come. So we do challenges in there. We do weekly wives talk. And then of course I have my DNA of a Happy Wife program where wives can really come in and really get strategies to prioritize their self-care, to really communicate more effectively, and to really achieve greater intimacy. Then we bring in Kelvin to give a little guest spotlight in for the wives.
let me pop in every now and then.
Oh yeah,
You hear from the man's perspective.
he definitely been dropping some nuggets. I'm just making this up, but there's a couple and they are in the Gulf and they're experiencing challenges or some dysfunction, and they just feel like I'm done with this. It ain't no help for her, ain't no help for him. What would you say someone in the marriage or both of them are at their wits' end with their relationship?
Well, the first thing they need to understand that it's not over. You know, that you've made a commitment, you've taken some vows, and it's not over.
Yeah.
You know, now there's a difference when you're in a marriage and there's abuse going on. There's a difference when you're in a marriage and you fear for your life. Right now we're talking about something totally different, you know, but outside the realms of that, you know, then any marriage, you know, regardless of whether it's infidelity, another child or whatever, you know, anything can be fixed. That's the first thing that they need to understand, that and they're not alone. This is not an isolated thing. They're not the only person on the planet Earth that this has happened to. They also need to know that as well.
I love that, babe. I would say that I think we have to go back to the definition of insanity. The definition of insanity is essentially keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think sometimes when we are with our mates, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, thinking, I'm going to get at this wall and it's going to stick this time. You know, I'm going to still do this and it's going to take this time.
Yeah.
And at some point, we have to realize if it's not working, we have to pivot.
Yes.
And so, you know, for so long, I would approach Kelvin the same way, thinking, all right, I know this joker's on a slow bus, but eventually he's going to get it, right? Like I used to, you know, come at him the same way. And then when I changed my approach, man, the world opened up for me, right? And things got so much better in our relationship. And so I would like to say, even when you feel like you are tired, I would say, what else can you do that's different than what you're doing? Like if you keep approaching it the same way, like you have to realize that's not working. So let's be open to trying something different. And that's what it's about, trying something different. I always say that it comes back to your expectations. Your expectations, because ultimately when you are sad or whether you're mad, it's because your spouse did something that you did not want them to do, or they didn't do something that you wanted them to do. And regardless of what side of the coin it was on, it was because of your expectation of that. And so when we really take a look at the expectation, is the expectation realistic? Is it reasonable? And have we communicated our expectations to ourselves? Right. And so I feel like we have to start there, because when you're frustrated, it's because your expectations weren't met. So let's check your expectations. Right. And having said that, you may say, well, they're realistic. And I would say, well, let's just make sure they're realistic. Right. Let's make sure that you're not expecting your spouse to be like somebody you see in the movies. You're expecting your spouse to be like how your dad was to your mom. That may work for their marriage, but you all are two different people. So you have to say, is this realistic for what we have and who we are? Not basing your marriage and trying to model it off of your parents or somebody you saw on TV. So we really have to make sure our expectations are reasonable and they're realistic, and we've communicated them to our spouses, because when you're mad or whether you're sad, it's because your expectations have not been met.
So your answer is expectations.
My answer is expectations. Okay. That was Kelvin's way of saying, babe, get to the point. That was Kelvin's way of saying that.
So I would say the biggest thing to be successful in marriage, serve the other person, regardless of what it is. You know, your thought and your idea and everything that you do should be always thinking about serving that person first. Everything else comes after that. And when I say serving, I don't mean a beck and call and everything. I mean,
we got you.
Yeah, just putting that person in the forefront of your mind.
And all the decisions.
Every single thing, right. You know? So, yeah.
If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're all doing, where should they go?
loverespond.com. That is the place where you'll find resources to help you, even free resources. So we have the Lovers Bond Guide to turn up your marriage, right? And so if people are saying their marriages become blah and boring, a little bit predictable, we know how to help spice things up. And so there's the Lovers Bond Guide to turn up your marriage. It's totally for free. And once you go there, it gives you ideas that you and your spouse can do. And the great thing about it is the guide is really kind of set up to have a list of things that you can do where it's fun. Because for some couples, you don't even laugh anymore. Every conversation is serious, right? It's like, okay, what's for dinner? Okay, the refrigerator broke. How we gonna pay for it? Okay, well, mama, I need to go to the grocery store for mom. Like all the conversations are really transactional conversations. And sometimes, a lot of times, they're heavy, right? And so the guide allows you to do some things where you all can actually enjoy one another and have fun. And then there's another section in there for romantic, right? Like, need I say more? Like, right? We need to get beyond just doing movies and dinner, right? So there's some other romantic things that you and your spouse want to do if you have that vibe. And then the other list is stuff that's interesting. And what we like to say with this list is sometimes you need to create new memories, right? We keep doing the same thing over and over again. So now you need to get each other out of your shells, out of your routine date night stuff, and do things differently. And this is where you create a good understanding of growing together, right? Because now you're going out and doing something that you don't normally do, and you're doing it together. So now it's helping you all grow together. It saddens me when people get to year 15, 20, 25, and they get divorced because they didn't grow together along the journey. So when you start to do these things to kind of, make sure that you're not just living together, but you're also, like you're a unit and you're growing together, then that helps sustain your relationship long term. So I would love for your listeners to download that free guide at loversbond.com.
On behalf of the TMC family, we'd like to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules and adding value to us all.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
This has been a really fun conversation. So it's got us thinking about when we got married back in the day.
So we hope you enjoyed this video today. And if you did, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps us get the word out. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders all around the world every week.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationships from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.